What, I mean, when you talk about those formative influences, what were some of the impacts that they had upon his life?
Well, he grew up in an extended family.
Good.
A family where his parents were always present. There were aunts and uncles and cousins, and even people who lived in the neighborhood along Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia, where Dr. King grew up. He was surrounded by this kind of extended family. The church also was a part of that extended family, Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And Dr. King talks about that in his interviews and in some of his writings about the impact of aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, and those who had no blood kinship to him, the impact of those persons on his development, intellectually, morally, spiritually. So we have to take into account that extended family. Secondly, the black church, not simply Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, where he grew up. His father was pastor of Ebenezer in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But Ebenezer Baptist Church taught him an understanding of the gospel as it relates to issues of social justice, because Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., Dr. King's father, was heavily involved in boycotts in Atlanta. He fought for equal pay for black and white teachers. He fought for equal powers for black and white policemen. So Dr. King grew up in Ebenezer Church, and he also attended Wheat Street Baptist Church, which was pastored by Dr. William Holmes Borders, who was located along Auburn Avenue as well. So I think he got from these churches a sense of the importance of the social gospel. That is, that religion should not relate simply to personal salvation. It should also teach us a sense of social responsibility. And I think the black churches in Atlanta were very, very important in that regard. I think you have to also take into account Morehouse College, because at Morehouse College between 1944 and 1948, Dr. King was exposed to black preacher intellectuals like Benjamin E. Mays, George Kelsey, Walter Shivers, Samuel Williams, others, who taught him that religion should be not simply spiritually satisfying, but socially relevant as well. You must take into account the black neighborhood of Atlanta. And in the black neighborhood of Atlanta, he experienced a sense of community. And I argue that his earliest understanding of community developed out of his exposure to a black neighborhood in Atlanta, where there was a strong sense of the importance of church, a strong sense of the importance of extended family, and so forth.
And so these three elements helped to make Dr. King what you believe he would eventually become.
Exactly.
And it was out of this, those formative years,
yes,
that it was very easy for him to launch into some of his other activities.
Exactly right.
Later on. Now,
yes,
what were some of those other areas that you broke down? We caught those three formative years. Now, what were some of the large topics beyond that?
I think we have to take into account his education at Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania, and his education at Boston Theological Seminary, Boston University, because at Crozer and Boston, he sort of received a kind of conceptual framework to articulate ideas that he had brought from the black church. He left the black church, for an example, knowing that, that God is real, that you don't question the reality of God, that you don't question the role of God in human history. But when he went to Crozer in Boston, he met personalistic theologians, philosophers, other thinkers who gave him a kind of conceptual framework, an intellectual framework for articulating these ideals that he'd brought from his background in the church. So I would say that his education in the North was particularly important, and his exposure to black culture in the North were also very important.
Very good. And Dr. Baldwin, we're ready for our first commercial break, after which we'll come back and we'll talk about scholarship and some of the other things that you're involved with dealing with Dr. King. And we'll be back with you following this short commercial break.